Man visits shelter and Pitbull starts crying. What happens next will leave you in tears. It was a chilly morning, and the town of Millbrook was just starting to wake up. The sun peeked out shyly from behind the clouds, casting a soft golden glow over the streets. Jack Thompson, a 65-year-old retiree, walked along the quiet sidewalks, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his coat. His silver hair shimmered faintly in the light, and his weathered face held a mixture of sadness and determination. Jack wasn't heading to a coffee shop or the park. No, his destination was the Millbrook Animal Shelter, a place he had been visiting every morning for the past year. Jack's footsteps echoed in the stillness, a steady rhythm that matched the quiet ache in his heart. Exactly a year ago, he had lost Max, his beloved Pitbull and constant companion for over a decade. Max had been more than just a dog to Jack. He was family, a source of unconditional love and joy. The day Max passed away was the darkest in Jack's life. Since then, his home had felt emptier, quieter, and lonelier. Jack had started volunteering at the animal shelter to cope with the loss, hoping to fill the void left by Max with the company of other animals in need. The shelter stood on the outskirts of town, its faded blue paint peeling slightly from the walls. It wasn't much to look at, but to Jack, it had become a sanctuary. As he approached, the familiar sounds of barking and meowing reached his ears, bringing a faint smile to his lips. Pushing open the door, he was greeted by Sarah, the shelter's young manager. Sarah was always cheerful, but today, she noticed something different about Jack. "Morning, Jack," she said warmly. "How are you holding up?" Jack hesitated before responding, his voice soft. "It's Max's birthday today. He would have been 12. Sarah's smile faltered, replaced by a look of sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Jack. I know how much you miss him." Jack nodded, clearing his throat. "Thanks, Sarah. Anyway, what needs doing today?" Before Sarah could answer, a commotion erupted from the back of the shelter. Frightened whimpers and sharp barks filled the air, drawing both of their attention. "Oh no, not again," Sarah muttered, her brow furrowing. "It's the new arrival. He's a Pitbull, came in late last night, badly abused. We haven't even been able to get close to him." Jack's heart tightened at the thought of an animal in such distress. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked. Sarah hesitated. "Be careful. He's terrified of people. We don't know how he'll react." With a nod, Jack headed to the isolation area at the back of the shelter. As he approached the last kennel, the whimpering grew louder. Crouching down, Jack saw a large Pitbull huddled in the corner. His brindle coat was dull and matted, and scars crisscrossed his body, telling a heartbreaking story of cruelty and neglect. The dog's eyes, wide with fear, darted nervously around the small space. Jack's voice was gentle as he spoke. "Hey there, big guy. It's okay. You're safe now." At the sound of Jack's voice, the Pitbull's ears twitched, and he slowly turned his head to look at him. Their eyes met, and for a moment, everything seemed to pause. Then, something incredible happened. The dog's trembling stopped, and his tail, which had been tucked tightly against his body, began to wag hesitantly. A soft whine escaped his lips, and to Jack's astonishment, tears welled up in the dog's eyes. "Sarah," Jack called out, his voice shaky with emotion. "Come quick." Sarah rushed over, her eyes widening at the sight. The Pitbull, who had been unapproachable just moments ago, was now pressing himself against the kennel door. His gaze locked onto Jack with an intensity that was almost surreal. "I don't believe it," Sarah whispered. It's like he knows you." Jack's mind raced as he unlocked the kennel door. Sarah started to protest, but the Pitbull didn't hesitate. He launched himself at Jack, knocking the older man off balance. But instead of attacking, the dog covered Jack's face with frantic licks, his body wriggling with joy. Tears streamed down Jack's cheeks as he wrapped his arms around the dog, holding him close. "Max," he whispered, barely daring to believe it. "Is it really you?" The Pitbull let out a soft woof, nuzzling into Jack's embrace. The scars, the fear, the pain, none of it mattered now. Somehow, against all odds, Jack's beloved Max had found his way back to him. Jack's mind flashed back to the day he had lost Max. They had been on their usual morning walk when Max spotted a cat darting across the street. Before Jack could stop him, Max had bolted, his leash slipping from Jack's grasp. The sound of screeching tires and a sickening thud had filled the air. Jack had rushed to Max's side, cradling him as tears streamed down his face. In the chaos that followed, animal control had taken Max's limp body, and Jack had assumed the worst. But now, it was clear that Max hadn't died that day. Somehow, he had survived and endured unimaginable suffering before ending up at the shelter. "Oh, Max," Jack murmured, his voice choked with emotion. "What did they do to you, boy?" "I'm so sorry." Sarah watched the reunion with tears in her eyes. "Jack, we need to get him checked out by a vet. He's been through so much." Jack nodded, reluctantly loosening his hold on Max. "I'm not leaving his side," he said firmly. Dr. Martinez, the local veterinarian, arrived shortly after to examine Max. Despite his injuries and past trauma, Max remained calm, drawing strength from Jack's presence. "He's been through a lot," Dr. Martinez said, her voice heavy with sympathy. "Old fractures, scars, malnutrition. But with proper care, he can recover." Jack's hand never left Max's head. "He'll get the best care. I promise." There was one more hurdle to overcome. Technically, Max was still considered a shelter dog, and there was paperwork to fill out. But Sarah, understanding the extraordinary circumstances, fast-tracked the process. "Max already knows where he belongs," she said with a smile. "You can take him home today." As Jack prepared to leave with Max, word of their miraculous reunion spread through the small town. By the time they stepped outside, a small crowd had gathered. Neighbors who remembered Jack and Max from their daily walks wiped away tears as they witnessed the joyful scene. "It's a miracle," Mrs. Henderson, Jack's next-door neighbor, said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We've all missed seeing you two together." Max, overwhelmed by the attention, pressed closer to Jack's side. "It's okay, boy," Jack said reassuringly. "These are friends." Their walk home was slow, with Max still weak from his ordeal. But as they approached Jack's modest house, Max's tail began to wag. By the time they reached the front porch, he was practically pulling Jack along, eager to be back in the place he had always called home. Inside, Max trotted over to his old bed by the fireplace and settled down with a contented sigh. Jack sank into his armchair, overwhelmed by a mix of emotions. "Welcome home, Max," he whispered, his voice thick with tears. The days that followed were a mix of joy and challenges. Max's physical wounds began to heal under Jack's devoted care, but the emotional scars took longer. Some nights, Max would wake up trembling, caught in the grip of a nightmare. Jack would sit with him, speaking softly and stroking his fur until the trembling subsided. Slowly but surely, Max's playful spirit began to resurface, bringing laughter back into Jack's home. Their story, full of heartache and hope, started to spread. People from all over the community reached out, inspired by the bond between Jack and Max. But their journey was far from over. Over the following weeks, Jack and Max began to settle into their new normal. It wasn't easy, but the bond between them grew even stronger with each passing day. Max's recovery was slow, but his spirit was undeniable. Each morning, Jack would wake up to find Max sitting by his bed, his tail thumping gently against the floor. It was as if Max was reminding Jack, "I'm still here." The townspeople, too, played their part in the journey. Jack's neighbors would often stop by with treats for Max, or simply to check in. Mrs. Henderson, who lived next door, had taken to baking Max his own special dog treats. For the town hero, she'd say with a smile, her eyes twinkling. Max had become something of a local celebrity, and it wasn't long before news of their reunion spread beyond Millbrook. One day, as Jack and Max were taking a slow stroll through the park, a man approached them. He looked hesitant but determined, holding a camera in his hands. "Excuse me, Mr. Thompson?" he began, his voice unsure. "I'm with the local news station. We've heard about your story, and we'd love to feature you and Max." Jack was taken aback. He wasn't one for attention, but the reporter's earnestness made him pause. He glanced down at Max, who was sniffing the grass with his usual curiosity. "I'm not sure," Jack began, but the reporter quickly added, Your story has touched so many people. It could inspire others to adopt shelter dogs and give them a second chance." That struck a chord with Jack. He thought of all the dogs still waiting behind bars at the shelter, longing for a home, a family, and love. "All right," he said with a nod. "If it can help even one dog, we'll do it." The news segment aired the following week, showing footage of Jack and Max walking side by side, their bond undeniable. Jack spoke candidly about his grief, the day he lost Max, and the miracle of their reunion. But the highlight was Max himself. The camera captured his gentle demeanor, his wagging tail, and the undeniable love in his eyes whenever he looked at Jack. The response was overwhelming. Calls flooded the shelter, with people asking about adoption. Sarah, the shelter manager, could hardly keep up. "Jack, you wouldn't believe it," she said one day, breathless with excitement. "People are coming from all over to adopt. Dogs we thought would never find homes are leaving with families. All thanks to you and Mac." Jack felt a swell of pride, but it wasn't about him. It was about Max and every other dog like him who deserved a second chance. "It's not just me," he said humbly. "Max is the real star." As life began to stabilize, Jack decided to take Max on an adventure. "We've been through so much," Jack said one morning, scratching Max behind the ears. "How about a little trip, boy?" He packed up his old truck with supplies and loaded Max into the passenger seat. They set off on a road trip to the nearby mountains, a place Jack had always wanted to visit but never found the time. The drive was peaceful, with the windows rolled down and the fresh air rushing in. Max stuck his head out of the window, his tongue lolling happily. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt a sense of peace. They stopped at small towns along the way, meeting friendly faces and sharing their story with anyone who asked. Max's gentle nature won over everyone he met, from curious children to skeptical adults. When they reached the mountains, Jack and Max hiked through trails surrounded by towering trees and breathtaking views. It was hard for Jack to believe how much his life had changed in just a few months. At one point, they reached a clearing with a panoramic view of the valley below. Jack sat on a rock, Max by his side, and took a deep breath. "This is what life's about, Max," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You and me, together." But the road wasn't without its challenges. Max still had nightmares from his time in captivity. Some nights, he would wake up trembling, his whimpers breaking Jack's heart. On those nights, Jack would sit beside him, stroking his fur and speaking softly until Max calmed down. "You're safe now," Jack would whisper. "I've got you." The bond between them continued to heal not only Max but Jack as well. For Jack, Max was a reminder that love could triumph over even the darkest times. He started volunteering more actively at the shelter, encouraging others to adopt and sharing his story with families who were hesitant about taking in a rescue dog. One day, Sarah approached Jack with an idea. "Jack, what if we held an adoption event? We could celebrate Max's journey and use it as a way to get more dogs adopted." Jack loved the idea. Together, they organized an event at the local park. They called it Second Chances Day. The event was a huge success. Families from all over came with their pets, and the shelter brought in dogs looking for homes. Max, of course, was the star attraction. He moved through the crowd with ease, accepting pets and treats with his usual charm. As the day came to an end, Jack took the stage to thank everyone for coming. Max sat faithfully by his side, his tail wagging gently. "A year ago," Jack began, his voice steady but emotional, "I thought I'd lost my best friend forever. But life has a funny way of surprising you. Max and I found our way back to each other, and it's changed both our lives." He paused, looking down at Max, who gazed back at him with pure adoration. "Our story isn't just about us. It's about every dog waiting in a shelter, hoping for a second chance. If Max can teach us anything, it's that love can heal even the deepest wounds. So, if you have room in your heart and your home, consider adopting. You might just find your own Mac." The crowd erupted in applause, and Max let out a happy bark, drawing laughter and cheers. As the event wrapped up, Jack felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Max had not only changed his life, but was now changing the lives of others. As they walked home that evening, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the town, Jack felt a deep sense of gratitude. Life wasn't perfect, and there would always be challenges, but with Max by his side, he knew they could face anything together. "Come on, Max," Jack said as they reached their front porch. "Let's go inside. We've got a lot of life left to live." Max wagged his tail, bounding up the steps with energy and joy. Jack followed, his heart full of love and hope for the future. Together, they had faced loss and pain, but they had come out stronger, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and second chances.